Okay, so welcome everybody to this month's community session. We've got a presentation today. We've got some bigger updates from the maintainers coming as well. As we go through today, I want to try and take advantage of the Q&A functionality in Zoom. So you should see at the bottom of your Zoom window, or if it is popped out, so you get the menu bar at the top, there's a Q&A button in there. As we go through the kind of like as Frederick's going to be giving updates on the maintainer update, and we go through the presentations today, please do take advantage of the Q&A section if you want to ask any questions in there, and then we can run through those questions, of course, through the session. Please also make use of the chat. I'll keep an eye on that as we go through as well. But without further ado, welcome everybody to May's community session today. Today we've got a few updates, so we're going to jump over in a minute to Frederick, who's going to be guiding us through some release updates and a maintainer update around declarative integration. We're then going to quickly hand over to some of my colleagues from Spotify who are joining us today to give us some updates around what's on the roadmap, what's coming up, what are the things happening around Backstage for Spotify at the minute. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it quickly over to Mr. Frederick to give us some updates around the release.
Yeah, hey everyone. Yeah, so I'll just briefly go through what happened in the previous release, 1.14 that went out the other day. So a couple of important points then. The time has come to deprecate React 16. We have a policy of maintaining, two versions actively supported. It's been 16 and 17 for quite some time, and it's time to start dropping 16 in favor of 18. Nothing's changing right now for people more than you will see warnings when you're using the Backstage CLI. So no rush, but it's time to start thinking about moving off of React 16 if you're on it. Let us know if you have any questions about that on Discord or elsewhere. There's been some fantastic work done on the OpenAPI tooling, where we're trying to establish a nice schema-first development, methodology for the backend services. There are some changes to the command structure and so on in there, and we're starting to look into client generation and similar based on those contracts. The auth backend now has persistent sessions, which is nice for those who are using auth providers that require session storage. So now scalability should work better for those types of use cases. And there's also a new DevTools plugin that helps integrators understand their instance, and it can show you, as sort of the owner of a Backstage instance, some details that otherwise can be a bit, annoying to try to get at, like installed versions of packages and what your config setup is like, and what version of Backstage you're on and so on. Yeah, and there's a security fix and some bug squash as usual, and much more. So please do upgrade. Next slide then. I also want to mention that there is a new incubating product area, which is to say that it's still small and young, and it's co-owned by the maintainers as well, together with Aramis, who has been doing all of this OpenAPI work, and deserves a round of applause for that. So we're starting out this product area to better align work around this going forward. If you'd like to contribute or are super interested in this topic, do reach out, and we'll see if you might join it. Right, next one. So what are we up to now? So the new backend system was released some time ago as alpha, and it took what used to be very large and hefty backend initialization code from a lot down to very little. And it established some patterns and structures for how things are wired up. Next slide, please. This is not just a standalone thing. It's actually part of a larger effort of simplifying the way that integrators and plugin makers interact with Backstage. And I want to give a shout out to the Adoption SIG, who have been an invaluable source of ideas and inspiration on this. The code-first approach that Backstage has, it really permeates many parts of the framework. And it is part of why it's so powerful and flexible. But it's also known to be, sometimes a bit daunting, especially when you first get started, because there's a lot of concepts to learn and you need to get coding essentially. And the front end is still particularly involved. So when it comes to like how you integrate plugins, and one metric for that is to look at how involved installation instructions get. You often end up interacting with yarn and imports and JSX and wiring up routing and stuff like that. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps then, based on where we are? Well, we are trying to get to a point where you need no code at all. So in a similar spike to what we did with the new backend system, we are investigating among the maintainers now what it would look like if we made it possible to stand up Backstage declaratively, purely. That is based on config and using opinionated defaults without needing code. And we tentatively call that declarative integration. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we want this to work for both front end and back end, so they can configure stuff declaratively. And it requires rethinking some parts of how the core gets wired up. So especially that goes for the front end. So it challenges the way that such things, for example, as the sidebar and the entity pages, like how they are made and declared. When we're researching this, we still want the old ways to remain intact. This is not like a Backstage 2. There will always be occasions where you want the full power of a code-first experience. So this is what people have been enjoying, but sometimes it can be a lot of work. But ideally, you should not have to reach for code most of the time. And when you do, there should be an ability to weave in your features and adaptations on top of this declarative base, rather than having to eject entirely just because you want to make some small to medium size change. And for plugins, there will be a smooth transition path, just like there is with the backend system. So no need for a big bang event changing the entire world at the same time. Yeah, next slide, please. So where can you get involved or following along with the progress? Yeah, it's just at a research level. So this is a pretty early announcement on our part. There are no artifacts to share. We are trying to essentially research what the solution shape might look like. And once we know more, of course, we will share it immediately with the community, and we're looking forward to your input and help in solidifying it. And there will be RFCs and presentations later this year. No promised exact timeframes, but this is a super exciting initiative that we are pursuing right now among the maintainers. And there's an occasional post about it on the declarative integration channel on Discord, if you want to just keep track in there for now. Thanks. That's all from me for now.
Cool. Thank you, Frederick. Again, if anyone's got any questions, please do shout out, drop them in the Q&A. We can, of course, answer them as we go through. But with that said, I want to hand over to Meg and to Bailey, who have got some updates around Backstage and Spotify.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee. Hi, everybody. My name is Meg Watson. I lead product for Backstage here at Spotify. Bailey and I are coming to you today to share a little bit more about our roadmap for how Spotify will be contributing to Backstage. In the spirit really of just kind of sharing a little bit more transparently what we're up to, what we're thinking about, and how we are thinking about the path forward together. So with that, I will move directly into where we're headed. So I think the first part here that we just wanted to ground in is just kind of why this continues to matter to Spotify. So when we think about the future of our own usage of Backstage, we just totally recognize and believe fully in how open source is a huge part of that story and of that success for us. So what we're talking about today is really around how we're continuing as a contributor, but we just want to really state clearly that it is so important to us as an internal company and how we leverage Backstage ourselves. So that's why we're here. That's why we're contributing and why we've made such a focus of this area to date. So a couple of things that, next slide, please, Lee, that we're thinking about. So really one is around continuing to remove barriers to adoption. So we know and we've seen tons of growth within the Backstage community so far. Next slide, you can kind of see this growth over the prior months. It's been really exciting to see this happen. And what we want to do is continue to contribute as Spotify and make sure that this continues. So what does it look like to get to the next 1,000 is something that we're thinking about here internally. A couple of pain points that we've heard about are outlined on the next slide. These are actually direct quotes that we've heard from folks. Things like, how do I get information in there? How do I keep it up to date? The difficulty around communicating best practices is something that we continue to hear, and then finding it difficult to figure out which path to take. So these are opportunities that we feel like we're hearing from adopters loud and clear, and things that we are ourselves thinking about, and we wanted to share these with the community here today. A couple other areas we're thinking about: exploring new products and services. I'll just breeze by this one really quickly to just say that we're kind of always on figuring out what else can we add to the mix. What else should we be thinking about as far as new products or services that Spotify is uniquely positioned to offer? Moving right ahead into our platform. So thinking about the way that in particular Spotify is using the Backstage platform. Something I'm really excited about here is what we're hearing within the catalog space. So we know that it could definitely be easier, for example, to get going with the catalog performance issues as well. So thinking about how that platform continues to move forward, not only for Spotify as it is a adopter of Backstage, but also just broadly how we can continue to contribute to the community at large. And lastly, on enhancing the core experience, the user experience here, just making sure that everything is able to be discovered within Backstage ultimately for ourselves and for the community at large, contributing as much as possible here. So with that, I will actually hand it over to Bailey, who will take us through how the team has been thinking about the user experience. Over to you, Bailey.
Thank you, Meg. Hello, everyone. I'm Bailey. I'm a product manager on Backstage, specifically focusing on the core experience. We'll just dive a little bit deeper into this pillar and kind of what we're thinking about when we say core experience. I'll say kind of the vision of what we're setting out to do in this team specifically is really take the points of friction that we've seen internally using Backstage and maturing our Backstage internally over the last years, and really identifying those points of friction and figuring out how we deliver value back to the open source community so that other external adopters will never see some of the points of friction that we've had internally. So that's kind of the vision that we're seeing here. We just want to make sure that we're making use of how long we've been trying Backstage and trying to make it work. So that's the vision of core experience. And some of the areas specifically, if we can get next slide, Lee, some of the areas that we've heard about through engineering satisfaction surveys is really how do we create this holistic experience with Backstage, making it really easy to jump from plugin to plugin and experience to experience, and also how do you find everything you're looking for between all of those experiences. So some of the ways that we've identified to go after this kind of problem of findability and discoverability is homepage, where we can really just put the content that people are looking for at the forefront, at the front page of the product, improving the navigation, so making sure that the content that they're looking for makes sense and there's kind of order to it so they can get to it quickly that way as well. And then design system. We've heard a lot of requests for this both internally and from some of the external adopters as well, who you want to make it easy to create these plugins and maintain these plugins. And if we can create a really scalable design system, it kind of makes it easier to put those experiences together really quickly and still have that cohesion throughout the platform. So I'm really excited about these three pieces we've been talking about internally. And we're also really thinking about this as we want to try these things out internally. And then once we see that they drive value, we'll kind of propose them to the open source end. So we'll see some RFCs soon coming to the open source project with some of the proposals of what we've seen and how they're going internally. And we can see how they fit into the broader product for everyone else. Cool, we can go to next slide and shift gears a little bit. Another very exciting piece that we've been focusing on with core experience is accessibility. So we have had kind of this ongoing hope, both internally and I think for the open source project as well, that we can make Backstage more accessible for everyone. The way that we're going about this is from the lens of 508 compliance. So this is kind of an article that is set by the government, that the US government, that kind of like make sure that we all meet the same standards as products. And so 508 compliance, there's lots of information on the internet if you're interested in what that means. We will be going for that for both our core open source plugins and our bundle plugins as well. So core open source plugins include software catalog, scaffolder, tech docs, and search. We're looking at hitting compliance for those around Q2. And then bundle plugins, we're looking at Q3, which include Soundcheck, RBAC, and Insights. And there's a few other plugins as well that are going to be quick follow-ons there. So we're really excited about this work. We've also, actually, Emma's on the call, who has recently shipped some great documentation on how we've added functionality and automated testing to the open source project so that you can, as a contributor, check the accessibility standards of the features that you ship as you go. So yeah, we're super excited to get this off the ground and running. And if anyone ever is interested in accessibility, we're also super keen to partner with some of our external folks on how we can push that along in the open source project. And that's all from me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bailey. Thank you, Meg, for sharing all of that. I haven't seen any questions come up in the Q&A, so just want to pause for a second to give some time if people do want to ask any questions. Please feel free. You should be able to unmute yourself now, or you can drop those into chat or into Q&A. Are there any questions for Bailey and Meg, or for Frederick, or any of the other maintainers around some of the declarative integration work? Okay, we've got, I apologize if I get this wrong. Ravi Kumar asks, is design systems include apply branding / company specific to React components to Backstage? I am not sure who's best for this. Maybe from a React perspective, Frederick, any thoughts?
There's going to be a mixture, right? I mean, there's always the theming ability that we have, where you can tweak a lot of the both the core and components and the plugins. As to how far the initiative will go in terms of replacing entire components and so on, I do not know for sure yet. I'm sorry.
I can hop in here and just share some additional context. This is also just to say, yeah, the design system thinking is quite early. I think the hope that we have is really, you know, just making the design system we have available more standard. Like that's kind of the first thing that we would set out to do. And then in terms of how it maybe scales to different, you know, company goals and things like that, or company, I guess, design elements. We don't have any explicit goals around that at this point. But it's an interesting idea, and we'd love to hear it in the RFC that will be to come around that area in the future for sure.
Okay, Dachi asks, can we integrate with Azure Active Directory users and groups? Mr. Frederick, I'm going to punt this one to you rather than torture Bailey or Meg with this one.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is yeah, exactly, as a separate sort of question. Yeah, and this is this in terms of the catalog or some other specific plugin? Because either way, yes, sign in and catalog ingestion and so on with Azure Active Directory should work out of the box. And feel free to reach out to us if you find any issues with it. But I think that should work.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Frederick. It was more like to integrate all our users and groups to for the projects and for the ERBC also. So it was more like using the existing groups into Backstage.
Yeah, so that a lot of people do that specifically to point at their source of truth for org information, be it LDAP or AD or something else, and then just automatically batch ingesting into the catalog and the rest of the ecosystem leveraging that ingested information afterwards. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ma asks, is there some docs or backend plugin which need to create a new database and special tables? Teaching me how to link to DBs, write SQL or something else.
I guess I'll take that one. Yeah.
Go for it.
So in all honesty, I think the docs leave a little bit to be desired in how full they are in terms of what you're asking for. However, the main repository on GitHub, backstage/backstage, has an enormous amount of prior art and inspiration to look at. So there's all ranges of plugins from large to small that do this, what you mentioned. For example, starting with a to-do plugin or something, I think you'll find digestible small pieces of migration code and so on that show how to use the built-in facilities of the framework.
Okay. There are no more questions that are coming up now. Please do drop them in if you have something over the next few seconds to minutes, and if not, we will wrap up today's community session. Just to give a little bit of a breather while we are seeing if there are any more questions that come up. Please don't forget these community sessions happen every month. We will be back around the same time next month. There'll be a GitHub issue that is posted into Discord around about 30 minutes to an hour after this session today. If you would like to present or if you would like to share or demo something that you've got, please feel free to sign up. You just need to add a little comment to that issue once it is posted. But otherwise, if there are no more questions, that brings us to a close for the community session today. So thank you to Frederick for dynamic integration and supporting us with the answers there. Meg and Bailey for sharing what's going on at Spotify. If you would like to learn more about Backstage, please go to GitHub backstage/community, and there is backstage.io. And we've just got one more question in from Ravi Kumar. Do we get any kind of help if we are having challenges with some of the Backstage features? For example, AZ or AD integration. I think the main port of call, if you are kind of looking for a little bit of support, the community itself is incredibly supporting when it comes to helping people getting going. So I really would recommend that you take a look at the documentation on backstage.io. If you need more support, then please try on Discord. The community is incredibly responsive and incredibly supporting. You'll also find all of our maintainers and a few of us that hang out in there as well that can give you a little bit more support. And then beyond that, there are some getting started tutorials and things up on backstage.spotify.com as well that you can try. And there are our special interest groups, which meet a few times each month as well. You can find out about them on backstage/community. But I really would start probably with If you're struggling with the documentation that is up there, I would start with the Discord community, and I am pretty certain you'll get some support and some help from in and around the community pretty quickly. Okay, that brings us to a close for today's session. Short but incredibly sweet. Thank you to everybody for partaking today, and for everyone on the call, wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I will see you at the next community session. Bye all.